I'm going to impose life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. I believe that's appropriate in light of the findings that I've already made.
It's life in prison for 25-year-old Taylor Schabusiness, the woman convicted of murdering and beheading her lover before sexually assaulting and dismembering his corpse.
But when did you start, cutting up his body?
I don't know, like almost right away. I was sucking and cutting at the same time.
An emotional sentencing hearing where family members of both the victim and defendant spoke out.
It's really one of the most horrific ways to end a person's life.
The list of superlatives don't seem to measure up to what you see and what you hear about, and what we heard about in the trial. This crime offends human decency, it offends human dignity, and it offends the human community. It really does.
Losing her mother, her father remarried, then find herself pregnant, and losing her son, and then losing her brother. So that's a lot for a young person to take in.
Sure, everybody loves Taylor. Think she's a monster? No.
Basically, to me, you took the easy way out. It's you did the most cowardly, weakest things that you could do possible.
But Taylor is not a throwaway. She's a human being. It's not an eye for an eye.
Taylor, I just wanted to say that I forgive you for what you've done to my son.
And words from the defendant herself.
So, Ms. Schabusiness, this is your opportunity to address me. If there's anything on your mind you'd like to say before I pass sentence.
No, there isn't.
Okay.
Law&Crime Network followed the case from the start when Schabusiness was arrested in February 2022.
Put your hands behind your back, quick. Anybody else in your apartment? You got blood on your hands here, too. No, on your hands.
This after her lover's mother found his severed head in a 10-gallon bucket.
I have no clue what's happening. My girl swears that she's found her severed head of her son in the basement.
Did you go down there?
In a bucket. I went down. I can't tell what the fuck it is. Pardon my language. I'm kind of a little freaked out.
Hello? Hi, Tara. So can you tell me what's going on?
Very positive. My son's head is in a bucket, a nail bucket in my basement.
What makes you think that?
Because I looked in the bucket.
What did you see?
Exactly what I told you.
Okay. Where's the rest of the body at?
No idea.
More than a year after her arrest, Schabusiness stood trial in Brown County, Wisconsin, where Law&Crime Network brought you gavel-to-gavel coverage of the shocking court proceedings.
And she lifts a towel that's covering the bucket. It's like a beach towel. And unfortunately, sees essentially a mother's worst nightmare. That her son's head is in the bucket.
Over the course of several days, prosecutors laid out the gruesome case, arguing Taylor Schabusiness murdered 24-year-old Shad Thyrion, her ex-boyfriend and lover. She was arrested with Thyrion's blood literally on her hands and later described the entire incident to detectives.
Ms. Schabusiness had blood on her hands when she was arrested.
You got blood on your hands here, too. No, on your hands.
He's in my body, but like it happened. I just didn't stop. I don't know why. I didn't stop. I felt bad because I'm like, damn, he's gonna be the reason after this. I'm like, might as well just kill it.
Schabusiness told officials she met up with Thyrion in February 2022 and intended to have sex with him. But what started as kinky sex soon turned deadly. Schabusiness admitted to using a dog chain to choke Thyrion to death.
So when he put the chain on his neck, he thought that you guys were going to have kinky sex, right? You think that's what Chad was thinking, maybe?
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
I was gonna do the same thing. I was going in, and I did, and I went in. But then he was like, choke me, but he didn't really say it, so I'm like, he put it on his neck. I already know I'm gonna choke him, and I did.
After that, she admitted to sexually assaulting Thyrion's body, later using kitchen knives from his mother's house to dismember his remains. Detectives found those in buckets, bags, and boxes across multiple crime scenes.
What other items were in the bucket?
There was remains, 2 different specific types of remains that I observed.
What kind?
There was a human head. There was genitalia in the bucket.
Let me stop you there. What do you mean genitalia?
What I would recognize as a penis and testicles.
And were they laying underneath the head?
They were visible after the head was removed, yes.
What else did you see?
I observed a black Miracle 3 kitchen blade knife that was removed. Kitchen knife. I observed a yellow pocket knife, I guess for best description, with a pocket knife with a yellow handle. There was like a head of a razor, like a shaving razor blade, a nail, Jolly Rancher, and there was a flesh material that the doctor just described as a flesh material.
Blood in the bucket as well?
There was blood in the bucket, yes.
Days after testimony, jurors returned back-to-back guilty verdicts for Schabusiness, finding her guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, dismemberment, and sexual assault. Jurors also determined Schabusiness was of sound mind at the time she committed the crimes.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Taylor Denise Schabusiness, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 1 of the information. Question 1. At the time the crimes were committed, did the defendant have a mental disease or mental defect? Answer, no.
But this week, months after the guilty verdicts were handed down, Schabusiness was sentenced for the crime. She appeared in court wearing a spit hood to cover her face. The hearing began with testimony from Schabusiness's grandmother, who described her troubled upbringing.
My granddaughter has been on her own for a while.
Okay. When Taylor's mother passed away in 2009, did that have an impact on Taylor?
Yes, it did, because she had just lost her mother, and a year later her father remarried, and the person he married had children of her own. So she was kind of I would say, didn't feel, well, she felt like she lost her mother, and now she was losing her dad because there were other kids involved in there. Taylor always kept everything to herself. She never said things about people. I know that she didn't feel comfortable. She felt like it was too soon after her mother passed away.
Esther Coronado explained her granddaughter felt loss after the death of her mother, her father's remarriage, and later the death of her brother.
And her father remarried, and she felt like abandoned. And then here she was in a home where there was 3 children, but one of them, I know that lives with the father, but 2 of them were living there, and her and her brother lived in the basement, and so she just from a nice home that she had, then she ended up living in the basement. But like I said, she never complained to me or said anything, but I went to visit them, and I could see that, she felt misplaced.
Coronado explained she now has custody of Schabusiness's nearly 2-year-old son, who lives with she and her husband in Temple, Texas.
Did there come a point in time where she gave birth to a baby?
Yes.
And what's the baby's name?
Mateo.
Okay. And where's Mateo right now?
He's with me.
The child lives with you in Texas?
Yes.
So you're caring for Taylor's child, correct?
Correct.
How old is the child?
He'll be 2 in October 3rd.
Was there a point in time where your granddaughter, Taylor Schabusiness, went into some kind of therapy or counseling or treatment program and then got released and then came to live with you before the baby was born?
I believe so.
Okay.
I do not know about what happened in Wisconsin. I only know that she wanted to have the baby in Texas with me because I was the only family close to her.
Okay. And so she had the baby in Texas, correct?
Correct.
Was that in like October of 2021?
Yes.
Okay. And when the baby was born, tell me a little bit about Taylor Schabusiness. Was she interacting with the baby? How did that go? Can you tell me about that?
Yes. Well, she was excited when she found out that about the baby.
While Schabusiness was happy to give birth, Coronado said her granddaughter never had custody of her son.
From your observations of Taylor Schabusiness with the baby, did it appear that she was, connected with the baby, or can you give me any feedback on that?
Yes, she was. She loved her baby. She prepared the things for the baby. So, because she thought he was going to be coming home. She was setting up things for him, but he never got to come home, and she didn't get to come home either. When she came down, she wanted to be close to somebody, a relative. And so when she had the baby, she was very happy and loved that baby. But it didn't last very long because 24 hours later, CPS came and took the baby away.
When you say CPS, you mean Child Protective Services?
Yes.
Okay, please continue. We're going to say some more.
Yes, I was going to say that after that, well, it was very hard for her. And they had told her that, well, I was there with her when they came and took the baby away, but they said I couldn't bring him home because she was here at home. But she said she would rather go to a shelter so I could bring the baby home. But that didn't happen. She left from the hospital, went to a shelter, but the baby didn't come home to me until a month later.
In the days after his birth, Schabusiness' son didn't stay with her or her grandparents.
We had everything prepared for the baby here at home, and her grandparents, her grandfather and aunt sent her a crib. We had the clothes, everything, waiting for the baby after she was released from the hospital, but she did not come home because CPS would not allow it. We couldn't bring the baby home either. He was placed with another couple, and they told her she had to have to live someplace else, so she went to a shelter, and she was there at a shelter.
But Coronado says she and her husband plan to adopt the boy.
And the plan is likely that you're going to have permanent custody or placement of the child with you and your husband, right?
Well, we're adopting him.
Okay.
We're adopting him. Taylor gave up her rights so that I could have Mateo, because we didn't want him going to anybody else, but to stay in the family.
When asked about her granddaughter's condition, Coronado pleaded for a lesser sentence, even tearing up as she spoke.
They found her guilty, and they want her to spend her life in jail. And I think that she has gone through a lot in her short time of being here. she has gone through a lot. There's a lot of things that she has to, losing her mother, her father remarried, then find herself pregnant and losing her son, and then losing her brother. So that's a lot for a young person to take in.
Coronado agreed that her granddaughter does need treatment, but is still of value to society.
Would you agree that your granddaughter, Taylor Schabusiness, needs some drug treatment, some counseling, all of that?
I do. I do believe that she does need some counseling and some help. She needs help.
Do you believe that she has good qualities?
Yes.
What are they?
I believe. She's a very caring person and also very trusting. She trusted people that said they care for her, and actually always she was what can I say, that she always ended up getting hurt because she trusted people thinking they cared, but she's always have had the problem that wherever she goes, people just use her and she thinks they care, but they don't.
Do you believe that your granddaughter, Taylor Schabusiness, should be given the chance to possibly be on parole or extended supervision sometime in the future?
I do believe. I know that she committed a crime, and I know that they want her to pay for it, but I believe that she should have the opportunity to come back to society one time and be with her son.
Next, Schabusiness's second cousin, Valerie Armour, took the stand.
Describe Taylor at that time in 2013 from what you recall.
She appeared to be a happy 15-year-old girl. She had a great sense of humor like her mother. She appeared to be well adjusted at that time. I enjoyed visiting with her and asking her how her life was going. And I had always told her I'd be available to her after her mother passed away.
Armour said she'd always be there for Schabusiness, again commenting on the hardship in her life.
Did you know about the losses that she suffered in her life? The loss of her mother, Marla, in 2009, and the loss of her brother, AJ, in July of 22?
Yes, I did. I grew up with her mother. We were very close as children. We spent holidays, summer vacations, and weekends together at my grandparents' house in Grove City, because when I was a child, I had moved to the East Coast. But we spend, weeks together in the summer playing, planning our future lives, playing with Barbies. We were very close as children.
Did you talk to Taylor about her feelings and how the loss of her mother affected her?
I did. I remember at Marla's funeral afterwards telling her I would always be available to her if she wanted to know more about her mother. I certainly would be available to tell her what she was like as a child, and I would be available for her the rest of her life if she needed anything. I lived in a different state, but I've always made myself available to her.
Do you have any comments for the court to consider on that particular issue?
I do. I have some comments about that.
Okay, go ahead.
So Taylor, she comes from a loving family. I know her to be loving. I know her to have empathy. She's capable of love. I believe she has suffered immense trauma in her young life. First with losing her mother in 2009. Anytime somebody loses their mother at any age, it's a great trauma and a tragedy. So she grew up without her mother, and then from what I've heard, living with her stepmother and her father, I had always heard that they had slept in the basement. So
Who slept in the basement?
that Taylor and AJ had slept in the basement
Okay.
when her father remarried. We had always heard that in the family. In 2019, we suffered more losses in the family. Taylor lost her grandmother in May. And then in September of 2019, we lost a cousin who was 27 to a motor vehicle accident. That would have been Taylor's first cousin. At that time, at that funeral, when I spoke with her father and AJ, she was doing well. She was working at the cheese factory. Her father, Art, was very proud of her at that time because she was doing well. And then I found out, had lost touch with her during the pandemic, and found out about what had happened when we found out AJ passed away July 1st, 2022. That's when all this came out. So she lost her brother to a motorcycle accident. So our whole family has experienced a lot of loss, and Taylor has experienced a great amount of loss. I'm a mental health professional. She has a trauma history, and I believe she has mental health issues. I'm hoping as she goes forward, she can get the help she needs, and with some deep introspection, be able to work on her issues. And I'm here to be as much as I can with her on her next journey of life.
Armour pleaded for the possibility of parole, saying Schabusiness is not a lost cause.
Do you have any comments on whether she should be considered for the possibility of parole or extended supervision?
I would like her to be considered for parole. I would like her to get a chance later in life to get to know her son. I think that would be very important to her, to be able to spend some time with him in person as she gets older, and other family members who are still around. Definitely.
Do you agree that Taylor needs drug and alcohol treatment?
Absolutely.
Do you agree that she needs mental health counseling?
Absolutely. And she needs to deal with her extensive trauma history.
You believe that she may need medication management?
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
Is she a lost cause?
She's not a lost cause.
Is she a monster?
No, she's not a monster.
She needs to be punished, correct?
She does need to be punished for what happened, and my family we regret what happened, and we apologize to Shad's family for what has happened.
Next, it was Schabusiness's father, Arturo Coronado, who took the stand. He again mentioned the hardships after Schabusiness's mother died.
And then your late wife, she passed away. Did that take a toll on your daughter?
Of course.
Can you tell me how that impacted your daughter from what you saw, what you observed?
Just, she was young. I mean, she lost her mother, and it's just hard to explain, but yeah, things aren't the same.
It was a traumatic event for her, is that fair?
Of course, sure.
And then at some point, the family moved from Evanston, Illinois to Green Bay in 2008, is that right?
Correct.
And you came to Green Bay because of a job, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then you lived here for a while in Green Bay, correct?
Yes.
She went to Bayport High School, correct?
Correct.
She went to Bayview Middle School, correct?
Howard Tomical School District.
Yes. And then at some point, there were some issues at the Bayport High School, and she went to Cotulla, Texas, correct?
To graduate, yeah.
Yeah. And she lived with your parents, Esther and Juan Coronado, in Temple, Texas, is that right?
Correct.
And she graduated?
Yes, she did.
And was that about 2016 or so?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. When you lived with her, was school a struggle for her, or was she able to do the work?
From time to time, I mean, she did okay. She had some issues. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay. I'm just going to see if you could just move the microphone a little closer, or move a little closer, because I can't hear you. Sorry. Would you help with homework and things like that?
Sure.
When you got remarried, did that take a toll on your daughter, Taylor?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay. Did you try to help in that regard to kind of bridge the gap?
Yep.
Okay.
He testified that his daughter is beloved, saying she should not face life in prison.
Strong family support network in the state of Texas. and or Ohio?
Sure, everybody loves Taylor.
Think she's a monster?
No.
You understand what she was found guilty of by the jury, correct?
I do.
First degree, intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, third degree, sexual assault, all felonies, all repeaters. You understand that, correct?
I do.
You understand the penalties, correct?
Yeah.
And for the homicide conviction, it's life imprisonment, but the issue is whether she gets the possibility of extended supervision or not, possibility of parole or not. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you have any comments for the court on behalf of your daughter?
Sure, I don't think she needs life imprisonment. I mean, the mistakes were made, you know, her not being in the right state of mind when it happened, you know, has a lot to do with it. Her whole life, she was a good kid, you know, drugs mess people up, and that's what happened, but I don't think that she deserves life.
You think she should be...
She has a child, you know, and it'd be nice for her to be able to see her child.
You agree she's got to be punished, correct?
Well, yeah. Yes.
Okay. But is it your testimony that you believe she should be given a chance at the possibility of parole sometime in the future?
Most definitely.
Next, Schabusiness' defense attorney Christopher Freilich called toxicologist James O'Donnell to the stand. He spoke of Schabusiness' repeated drug use over the years and on the night of the murder.
Methamphetamine is highly addictive, is that fair?
Extremely highly addictive, one of the most addictive drugs that we know.
Can, based on your training and experience and knowledge, can methamphetamine use cause hallucinations, visual or auditory?
Yes, both. They can cause a form of drug-induced psychosis.
What is psychosis?
Psychosis, the easiest way to describe it is a loss of touch with reality.
Delusion?
Delusions includes hallucinations, just the loss of touch. What they do makes no sense. What they say makes no sense. They're not reasoned with. To use an old term, they're out of it.
If Ms. Schabusiness indicated that she had used 51 hits of methamphetamine prior to the incident on or about February 22nd of 2022, would you have a concern about that?
What I have concern, yes, I've never heard of that much methamphetamine used in one setting.
O'Donnell said Schabusiness' drug use could have sparked mental health symptoms.
In this young lady's life, with a mental illness diagnosis or defect that is principally bipolar, extensive use on that day would cause significant intoxication and impairment. Methamphetamine affects the prefrontal lobe, executive function, judgment, discretion, consequences, and through a mechanism of altering the brain chemistry, principally dopamine and subsidiaries of dopamine and other neurotransmitters. That's the mechanism of the acute use. In a setting of chronic use in similar situations, she's already damaged goods. She already has brain damage from coming into the setting on the date of the homicide and using again. In other words, the chronic use causes over the constant daily insults to the brain function, the brain chemistry, the brain substance, such that even without the use of continuing use of methamphetamine, there is chronic damage that is present as a result of that long-term use, such that an individual has impairments to that, again, the prefrontal lobe, the cerebral cortex, deliberation, evaluation, judgment, risk-taking. So on that day, extreme, intensive methamphetamine intoxication. This young lady, because of her mental illness, the use of methamphetamine in the setting of mental illness, bipolar, particularly bipolar that's not being treated with a psychotropic drug, the methamphetamine exacerbates the bipolar disorder. And indeed, for the Schabusiness.
After O'Donnell's testimony concluded, emotional victim impact statements followed from Thyrion's uncle, Kelly Thyrion.
That there's no excuse for what you've done. I don't care if it's drugs or upbringing, you know. We all go through hard times growing up, at least the majority of us have. You have the opportunity to change that. You have the opportunity to, you know, see that you have a problem.
He called Schabusiness cowardly, saying she planned his nephew's murder.
Basically, to me, you took the easy way out. It's you did the most cowardly, weakest things that you could do possible. You know, you meet a person in school, you say he's your friend, you become friends, you become girlfriend, boyfriend, lovers, gain his trust of an innocent person that's very kind, would do anything for you. And I believe you used that and you had this plan and took your opportunity when you did. There's no excuse, you know, I don't see it no other way. To take advantage of someone's kindness like that, that's like the most irritating thing for me. You know, you get to know somebody and they trust you, and then you do that. You say, and then you say that you're a friend, you're his friend, you said that in the statements. It's like, man.
Kelly Thyrion went on to say his nephew's family may never recover from the shock of his murder.
It's going to be jail, institution, or death. And you chose that path, and you chose the wrong path. They sit here talking about being rehabilitated. Is Shad's mother going to ever rehabilitate from this? No, but you can go to an institution, you can go to prison and try to be rehabilitated, but I don't see no reason why you'd have parole after the doctor had just mentioned once you have so much damage that it's irreversible. You know, so why would... Don't make no sense to me even to have the option of parole to come back and to gain someone's trust like that again. You know, because that is like the lowest thing a person can do. You know what I mean? I just don't understand that.
To end his short speech, Kelly Thyrion compared Schabusiness to prolific Wisconsin serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, who was killed in prison while serving time for multiple murders.
But to take the cowardly path that you did and to make other people suffer because you were suffering is pretty shitty. So that name Taylor Schabusiness fits you well. And I'm not a praying man, but after Judge Walsh here sentenced you today, I will pray that you meet the same fate as your idealistic Jeffrey Dahmer. So have a good life, Schabusiness.
But it was the victim's father, Michael Thyrion, who made a shocking statement of forgiveness.
Taylor, I just wanted to say that I forgive you for what you've done to my son. And yeah, you made a bad choice, and now you have to live with it. But you know, I'm gonna miss Shad. He was a wonderful child too. Growing up, just mild mannered and just happy, and I know you made a bad choice, and like I said, I forgive you, and I'm gonna ask the judge if he can, you know, if she can see the streets again sometime. You know, it may not be soon, but I believe everybody makes bad choices, and maybe not to the scale, but I think there's a lot of hope for you. I think, you know, you can make use of your time and be a better person and do great things yet, you know, so it does no good for me to hate you, you know. I know you got a heart, I know you got a mind, and I wish you no harm.
With that, Assistant District Attorney Caleb Saunders addressed the court, recommending the highest possible sentence.
This really wasn't a bad decision. It was a series of conscious efforts. It was continued effort over, as she said, 3 to 5 minutes, as she's telling and describing for Detective Groff and Detective Kemp, pantomiming how she's pulling harder, how she's glibly talking about how he's turning purple, and I liked it. I'm pulling harder. He's coughing up blood. I'm pulling harder. I kept going. I was waiting for him to die. This really is an involved process. It's a method of ending another person's life that really is quite significant, and I think evinces some significant concerns going forward, both in looking at the nature of the offense, as we have to, but in looking at some of the other factors the court's to consider, and which I'll be commenting on earlier. It's really one of the most horrific ways to end a person's life. And again, it's bad enough to do to anyone, but as we heard, there was this level of trust and friendship and familiarity between the two, which I think is just really makes the acts of the defendant really incomprehensible in that respect. To engage in the acts that she did with his body, which I'm not going to comment on what those are. The court and counselor are aware of what happened, and the systematic and organized and laborious efforts she undertook. Again, that's nothing we've seen in this county.
Saunders argued it wasn't meth that led Schabusiness to commit the horrific crime or her troubled childhood.
But really, the defendant herself is telling us why this happened. And it wasn't because methamphetamine. It wasn't because of mental illness. She's telling law enforcement why this happened. It happened because she liked it. It's because she wanted to do it. And again, throughout the entirety of this case, we see this underlying motive is essentially, it's kind of consistent, right? We see, and we have seen acts of acting out, both in court and to examiners who are seeing her. It's consistent in the state's view with a lack of remorse. We consider the background of the defendant, and I echo the comments earlier. That's not a childhood. That's not an early adolescence that anyone should have to go through, and that's. It's difficult to hear some of that stuff. But when we consider that sort of background information, unfortunately, we deal with a lot of people who have substance abuse issues in the criminal justice system that lead them to make choices they wouldn't normally make, that leads them to become thieves or become burglars or become misdemeanant offendants. Really, I'm not sure we have a nexus here between that underlying substance issue or mental health history and the conduct that we're sentencing her for today.
Later, Saunders called Schabusiness a threat to public safety, arguing she was not remorseful for committing murder.
Concerning to not only hear the defendant talk about the offense to law enforcement, but the comments that were made in the pre-sentence report, which, as I mentioned, I think evince just an utter lack of remorse for what happened. And it's relevant, a lack of remorse, to one's character. Obviously, if somebody's remorseful for their conduct, that reflects favorably on their character, and the state would be the first to acknowledge when that's the case. Here, not only do we have a lack of that, we have really the opposite. We have the defendant in the PSI on page 7 saying, quote, "I don't have any regrets about what I did, and I do not feel remorseful for Shad. So the state's concern really is more, comments like that go more towards protection of the public.
For his part, defense attorney Christopher Freilich reiterated his client is not a lost cause.
What we have here is a horrific situation that happened. It can't be undone. Certainly the defense agrees that Taylor Denise Schabusiness has to be punished, but she's a young person. She's 25 years old. We can't undo what happened. What we know is that she's got family that supports her, that loves her, family in Texas, family in Ohio, extended family out there. They're all willing to try and help Taylor in whatever way they can. I think that my client, Your Honor, is not a throwaway. She's not a monster. She's certainly got problems, and over time I think she can get control over her problems, get help, get rehabilitation, and also be punished.
Freilich pointed to Michael Thyrion's statement, saying the court should consider his wishes as father of the victim.
But Taylor is not a throwaway. She's a human being. It's not an eye for an eye. I'm very impressed by Michael Thyrion, Shad Thyrion's father. He has a huge heart, and he forgives my client for what happened, and he, from what I heard, believes that he thinks that my client should be given the opportunity for parole or extended supervision down sometime in the future. And I'd ask that the court consider that. He's the victim in this case, and what he asks of the court should be strongly considered.
Freilich asked that Schabusiness one day be afforded parole, blaming drugs for his client's actions.
This has never been about an eye for an eye. It's about fairness and justice, that my client should be punished, but she should also be given the opportunity to have a chance at the possibility of extended supervision or parole supervision sometime in the future after she gets help. This was one incident. I would argue that my client should not necessarily receive separate punishments, although we have convictions for 3 separate crimes, but it was an incident that occurred on one particular date, February 22nd of 2022, that the sentences should be concurrent. I would argue, Your Honor, and ask the court to consider the fact that this was likely a meth-fueled type of incident on the date of this tragedy. Shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. I think it would be a tragedy to, as an argument on behalf of my client, to give her life in prison without the possibility of parole. I think that the court should definitely take into account what the defense is recommending, what the independent pre-sentence investigation is recommending, and what Michael Thyrion is recommending. I don't believe that my client wanted to do this or liked doing it. I think that she really wasn't able to completely understand or fathom what was going on. And when she was talking to detectives from the Green Bay Police Department, she was still hopped up on drugs. Her mind just wasn't thinking straight. How could it?
Next, Judge Thomas Walsh asked Schabusiness whether she wanted to address the court.
So, Ms. Schabusiness, this is your opportunity to address me. If there's anything on your mind you'd like to say before I pass sentence.
No, there isn't.
Okay.
With that, it was time for Judge Walsh to issue his ruling.
She has a limited court record. Certainly we have pretty much the entire extent of her criminal record in front of us here today. But it's a limited record that reflects on character. She's got a family who cares about her. And although sometimes I think people take that for granted, if you sit in this courtroom long enough, you'll realize that you should never take your family for granted, because so many people come in sitting in that chair in an orange jumpsuit and have absolutely no one who will come in and say, I'm with her. And that takes a little bit of fortitude to come in and do that. And frankly, today she's got extended family that comes in and does that for her, because her direct family are unable to do that for various reasons. And so I think that speaks to Ms. Schabusiness's character, because there's people in this world who find value and worth in her, that they're willing to come in and stand behind her.
While he commended Schabusiness's family members who spoke, Judge Walsh quickly changed focus to the severity of the crime.
I sit in this chair often, and I address situations where people have lost their lives, or people have been violated terribly, and I always indicate that really the offense in this case can't be overstated, and that seems very appropriate to say that in most cases when there's been such a death or a violation. But in this case, it seems different. In this case, you seem to run out of superlatives when describing what happened in this case. You really do. The list of superlatives don't seem to measure up to what you see and what you hear about, and what we heard about in the trial. This crime offends human decency, it offends human dignity, and it offends the human community. It really does. When someone loses their life needlessly, it's tragic. It really is. It's tragic for family and friends and community. When life is taken from a person in the fashion that it was in this case, where the victim's remains are cut up and packaged in containers, it's difficult to identify a human nature in those activities. It really is. It's very troubling. It's difficult to recognize the general belonging that most people have for their community. It's difficult to recognize community in anything that happened in this case. This is a small community that we live in, where the web of relationships almost encompass everyone who lives here, such that people look out for each other and care when something bad happens to one of our members. And in a broader sense, the community we exist in is the human community, as I've reflected on, and these actions are foreign to all of that community, and they shock the community beyond the ability to adequately express in words. They really do, and that's the gravity of this offense. That is the gravity of this offense. There aren't superlatives for it. There aren't really words for it.
In the end, Judge Walsh handed down a sentence of life in prison without parole.
I'm going to impose life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. I believe that's appropriate in light of the findings that I've already made. As far as count 2, mutilation of a corpse as a repeater, Class F felony, I'm going to adopt the recommendation of the pre-sentence investigation writer, 7.5 years of initial confinement followed by 4 years of extended supervision. That'll be consecutive to count 1. As far as count 3, third-degree sexual assault as a repeater, Class G felony, I'm going to impose 3 years of initial confinement followed by 4 years of extended supervision. That will be consecutive to count 2 and count 1. As far as the revocation cases, I'm going to impose 1 year of incarceration on each of those counts. Those will run concurrent to the other offenses. I've reviewed, as I've indicated, reviewed both of the pre-sentence investigation reports. There's certainly valuable things in them. I'm going to, as conditions of supervision, I'm going to require no contact with the victim's family, maintain absolute sobriety, complete SOT assessment and treatment follow-through, obtain and maintain full-time employment. To the extent there's ever supervision, GPS monitoring. I'm going to require an AOD assessment and follow-through, psychological evaluation and follow-through. The recommendations that are contained in the pre-sentence investigation report submitted by the defense indicates or suggests that there be services engaged in for substance abuse and other mental health issues. That's a reasonable suggestion, and I think I've encompassed it in the recommendations that I made, which is there needs to be a compass evaluation and follow through with any treatment recommendations that are proposed, but again, an AODA assessment and follow through and psychological evaluation so that Ms. Schabusiness can get the help that she needs.
From here, Schabusiness will be transferred to either Tachita Correctional Institution in nearby Fond du Lac or Milwaukee Women's Correctional Center. Prior to her sentencing, Law&Crime Network spoke with defense attorney Christopher Freilich, who indicated an appeal may be in Schabusiness's future. Reporting for Law&Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.